I'm Richard Barnett, and this is Sun Street Passage. London, one street at a time. If I asked you to show me the centre of London, or better still, the heart of the city, where would we go? It depends, I suppose, on who you are. If you were a tour guide leading a party of first-time visitors around London, your answer might be fairly easy to guess. You'd take us on a circuit of Trafalgar Square, Piccadilly Circus, Hyde Park Corner, the British Museum, the London Eye, Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, the Tower of London, anywhere that might appear on a postcard or a tea towel or in a scene-setting movie montage. This London is, to invert the title of one of my favourite books on the city, the London everybody knows, and which, as was said of the Taj Mahal, nobody ever really sees for the first time. As we contemplate it, the restless ghost of Johnny Rotten, never far away in London, rises up to remind us that this is just another instance of England's dreaming, an insubstantial pageant of history and heritage, power and commerce, realised somehow in stock brick and Portland stone. But it's as real as any dream. And just as dreams, or nightmares, are endlessly, elusively various, so there is a multitude of other Londons, banal and fantastical, evanescent and real. So where else might we go in search of the heart of the city? Bertie Wooster might ankle over to the fictional Drones Club on Dover Street for a game of darts and a half-bot of something decent. Henry James would retire to the non-fictional and very grand Reform Club on Pall Mall, not merely the centre of London, but perhaps the warm, bright centre of the world for this most sociable of men. Ian Nairn might raise a pint of Fuller's London Pride in the direction of the unnamed seven-way junction around the Royal Exchange. A vortex, he called it, but also an exciting place, with buses whistling off at all angles and a pedestrian platform to look at the traffic jams. Virginia Woolf, street haunter and flaneurs, might draw us away from the neon and velvet of the West End and towards the demotic bustle of the city. In September 1940, Woolf wrote to the composer and women's suffrage campaigner Ethel Smythe, who had fallen unrequitedly in love with her a decade before, of the passion of my life, that is, the city of London. In her diary that spring she had mused to herself, "What shall I think of that's liberating and refreshing? The river, say the Thames at London Bridge, and buying a notebook, and then walking along the Strand and letting each face give me a buffet." Woolf's Anglo-Saxon avatar, Virginia Beowulf, if you must, might turn off the Strand and lead us into Covent Garden, beneath which lie the remains of Londonwick, a 7th century fishing port assaulted and burned by Viking raiders. And 500 years before that, Lupa Virginia, redoubtable matron of Roman Londinium, might have parked her Carpentum outside the TK Maxx at the corner of Lombard Street and Gracechurch Street, before sauntering through a porticoed gateway into the great open marketplace of the Forum and, beyond it, the largest Roman basilica north of the Alps. If you were Aleister Crowley, and by the way I really hope you are, you might spirit us away in the direction of the setting sun to the far end of Fleet Street. In his delirious, self-indulgent first novel Moonchild, written in 1917, Crowley insisted that the heart of what he called the monstrous and misshapen conspiracy called London lies, in truth, at Charing Cross. Here, he wrote, is the true life of the city, the aorta of that great heart of which London and Westminster are the ventricles. John Keats felt rather differently. Writing to his sister-in-law Georgiana in January 1820, he observed wearily that, standing at Charing Cross and looking east, west, north and south, I can see nothing but dullness. And Henry James thought that the Charing Cross railway station, placed where it is a national crime. But the Ordnance Survey come close to agreeing with Crowley. The pin in their map of London, the point from which all road signs indicate distance to the capital, is the careworn statue of Charles I at the top of Whitehall, hardly a grimoire's throw from Crowley's Charing Cross. If you were William Shakespeare, you might give us tickets to the Globe, which stood only a few alleys away from its modern reincarnation in Southwark. But the heart of Shakespeare's dramatic London is on the other side of the Thames. George, Duke of Clarence, drowns in a butt of Malmsey at the Tower of London. Barely a bowshot away, Falstaff and his cronies carouse in the Boar's Head Tavern on Eastcheap. Jack Cade proclaims his conquest of the city from the London Stone, that thoroughly battered, possibly prehistoric slab of limestone set into the wall of 111 Cannon Street. Catherine of Aragon pleads her case before an ecclesiastical court at Blackfriars. Across the Fleet River, in the old Temple Garden, the Lords of England play out the opening moves of the Wars of the Roses by plucking red or white blooms. A few hundred metres from the temple, and almost 5 centuries later, an international circle of émigrés and activists gathered at 158 Fleet Street, where the Sudanese-Egyptian actor and journalist Duzé Mohamed Ali edited the African Times and Orient Review. Ali characterised his paper in revolutionary terms as a pan-Oriental, pan-African journal at the seat of the British Empire, and he published essays and polemics by radical commentators like H.G. Wells, Annie Besant and Marcus Garvey. The comedian Simon Munnery said that if Rome is the eternal city, London is the infinite city. I like that. Henry James seems to have had the same thought, though characteristically he took rather more syllables to express it. In English Hours, James wrote, "The mere immensity of the place is a large part of its savour. A small London would be an abomination, as it is fortunately an impossibility, for the idea and the name are beyond everything an expression of extent and number. Practically, of course, one lives in a quarter, in a plot, but in imagination and by a constant mental act of reference, the accommodated haunter enjoys the whole." Sun Street Passage is my attempt to connect the two halves of James's thought. I want to show you the whole of London, the immensity and the variousness of the city I've been haunting myself for almost 30 years now. I want to do this in the only way an individual Londoner can, through close attention to its particularity, its plots, its quarters, and most of all its streets. So, this is London, one street at a time. Here are the rules I've set for myself. For each episode, I'll walk a single London street, which might also be a square, a crescent, a mews or an alley. Then I'll come back to my attic in Blackheath and tell you all about it. I'll do an easy thing. I'll sketch out its history and topography, drawing on my own observations and the works of my favourite London writers and historians. And I'll try to do a harder thing. I want to evoke it, to give you a sense of what it's like, how it fits into London, how it's changed, and what kinds of life have gone on there over the decades and centuries. Above all, I want to find out, what does London's history look like from here? Each street must be in Greater London, defined as the area covered by my tatty old copy of the A to Z, and it must have a name that appears on maps and street signs. Each episode must be set in a different part of the city, let's say a different postal district from the previous one. And we won't visit streets which might feature in a guidebook or a tour bus route. There's much to see in the historic centre, but we have better things to do than stroll down Piccadilly or Oxford Street or the Strand. I want to show you the city as a whole and, occasionally, to stretch our legs and our Oyster cards to their limit. I'll walk each street from end to end on foot. History books and architectural guides and Google Maps are marvellous tools for exploration, especially if your mobility is limited or if you live elsewhere, and London can be seen to great advantage from the top deck of a bus or the back of a taxi. But I want to give you the city at ground level and at walking speed, the speed of thought and feeling through the eyes of a pedestrian. This will not be, to paraphrase Georges Perec, my attempt at exhausting a place in London. I can't tell you everything, and I wouldn't presume to try. This is, after all, the infinite city, in which countless lives have been written one over another until they become, in most cases, near illegible. Even on the shortest street, there will be stories or places or people I'll miss, and I'm always glad to find an excuse to return and learn more. The length of each episode will depend on how much I find to talk about, but I'm aiming for something in the region of 30 to 40 minutes. And for the moment, the podcast will be monthly, so look out for new episodes on the first Thursday of each month. Lastly, I'll break any of these rules to show you a street that's worth seeing. Not all these places are beautiful or breathtaking, but walking them will, I hope, tell you something about London, the city and its people, its past, its present and its future. If you're still listening, thank you. I think we'll have fun. So, let's go for a walk. It's a chilly, blustery spring morning, and I'm stepping off the Circle line at Tower Hill Station. The stairs up to the ticket hall are crowded in a good-humoured sort of way. This is one of those tube stations that's never really quiet. And after swiping their Oyster cards, most people make a sharp left turn, descending into the maw of a concrete subway that leads to the Tower of London. But we're going straight on, across an odd little paved forecourt, past the Tower Hill tram food kiosk with its ceaselessly churning slushy machines, past the tourists making TikToks of squirrels rummaging in litter bins, through an iron gate and into a small public park. We're standing in an irregular polygon of grass and stone, perhaps 100 metres across. This is Trinity Square, on the eastern fringe of the city, just to the north of the Tower of London. A central lawn, rather muddy today, is bounded by a path and standard-issue civic shrubbery, and fringed with tall London planes, their branches bare and spidery today. An endlessly busy road, Bywood Street, separates the southern edge of the square from the newish plaza beside the tower. Edwin Lutyens' austere Merchant Marine Memorial dominates the horizontal plane inside the iron railings, and the vertical space around it is overshadowed by the old Port of London Authority building, a pompous, jolly heap of imperial Baroque stonework on the northwestern side. The first thing to strike me as I look around is the skyline. From here we can see a partial anthology of what we might call London's trademarks. Behind us to the east is the least interesting silhouette, the tube station tucked into the basement of a blocky, studiedly inoffensive 5-storey hotel with those irregular fenestrations beloved of 21st century urban architects. Beyond it, a nubbly segment of Roman wall, or rather the medieval city wall, built on Roman foundations and threaded with courses of red Roman brick, carries the eye to a modern viewing platform capped by a sundial. Its gnomon, echoing the sail of a yacht, seems to recoil in horror from a corner of Rent and Howard Wood's Tower Hotel at St Catherine's Dock, a punishing stack of 70s béton brut in which Kafka's Joseph K. might still be searching for his accusers. Next to this, the Tower of London, a low jumble of crenellations, turrets and bastions, appears positively sweet, and the baronial pinnacles of Tower Bridge behind it are rendered effete and somehow French. Then the Shard, petrocapitalism's gleaming middle finger to the idea of a human-scaled city, answered by the Dutch spire of All Hallows by the Tower and the cheerfully overbearing mass of the Port of London Authority. As we complete the circle, Portland stone gives way to contemporary glass. An angular, faceted pile-up of city towers rises behind the tidy Georgian of Trinity House, and the comic prepuce of the Gherkin peeks out beside a glorious weather vane in the form of a golden galleon. In this setting, Trinity Square has the feel of a shallow, eddying pool beside a fast-flowing river, tucked under great cliffs of brick and stone. It's a place of strange collisions, of overlapping and sometimes jarring moods and stories. A boundary marker for the City of London stands on the western edge of the square, opposite a Wetherspoons named the Liberty Bounds. In one sense, then, this is the beginning of the East End. But in atmosphere and streetscape, Trinity Square is firmly part of the city, and the East End actually begins, as it has for 2,000 years, on the far side of the Roman wall. On a sunny day, this might be a place to sit or stroll and escape the city for half an hour, but it's hardly tranquil. The noise of traffic from Bywood Street and the periodic rumble of the Circle line are perceptible throughout the square. Tower Hill Station, at least, is a tourist hub, but for a macabre kind of tourism. Jack the Ripper walking tours, torture chambers, smothered princes, beheaded queens, the kind of suffering that becomes picturesque after a century or two. This is the summit of one of the 7 hills of London, beloved of middle-aged psychogeographers, some of whom will also tell you that its soil holds the head of Bran the Blessed, a legendary giant and king whose exploits are recorded in the Mabinogion, and the body of Brutus the Trojan, descendant of Aeneas and, that word again, legendary founder of London. On the spring equinox, London's druids, clad in white robes, make a solemn procession to Tower Hill Terrace, just across the road, to mark the changing seasons and the return of fertility to the earth, a ceremony recorded in Ben Edge's 2021 documentary Frontline Folklore. So Trinity Square is a locus of sacred mystery for those who care to perceive it. But this little park is a place of memory and connection in other senses. To London's mythological origins, certainly, but also to the brutality and the vindictiveness of high politics, to the importance of ships, sailors and the sea in British history, to the power and reach of the British Empire, and to the wars this maritime kingdom fought. From the 13th century, this was part of the liberties of the Tower, a strip of defensible open ground around the walls of the fortress, distinct from the City of London, but under the jurisdiction of the Constable of the Tower. So in its origins, it was a kind of negative space, defined not by what stood here, but what lay around it. And this was not, to put it mildly, a salubrious neighbourhood. The Tower archives record complaints of rubbish dumped here, especially after the first visitation of the Black Death in 1348-49. 3 decades later, at the height of the Peasants' Revolt in June 1381, rebels took the Tower. Within it they found Simon Sudbury, Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Hales, the Lord High Treasurer, William Appleton, a wealthy physician, and John Legge, a sergeant in the King's Guard. These 4 unfortunates were led out onto Tower Hill and beheaded messily before a crowd. This episode of impromptu and spectacular violence on a piece of high ground beside a fortress used to imprison noble traitors seems to have given the English state an idea. The first official public executions on Tower Hill took place in May 1388, and the last, that of Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, a leader of the 1745 Jacobite Rising, in April 1747. Those who fell under the axe here are commemorated on the far side of the square. But we'll begin our circuit on the north side, with the building that turned this blood-soaked patch of waste ground into a neat and decorous city square. In 1514, the Deptford Guild of Mariners received a royal charter from Henry VIII, appointing them Master, Wardens and Assistants of the Guild, Fraternity, Brotherhood and the most glorious and undivided Trinity and of St Clement in the parish of Deptford Strand in the county of Kent. The roots of what, for brevity, we'll call Trinity House may go much deeper into English history. Several medieval ports had corporations dedicated to what Henry's charter called the relief, increase and augmentation of the shipping of this our realm of England, and there seems to be some evidence for a national maritime guild under King John and even Alfred the Great. This latter claim may well be wishful thinking. Just as we attribute any witty remark to Oscar Wilde, so the Victorians liked to claim Alfred as the founder of any English institution they admired. Though its remit was ostensibly national, the shipping of this our realm of England, under Henry the authority of Trinity House reached only as far as the Port of London, the River Thames and the Royal Dockyard at Deptford. Perhaps because of its proximity to London, the seat of royal and mercantile power, and its support from Henry, the new corporation quickly gained influence and responsibility. In 1556, a parliament under Henry's daughter Mary extended its authority to the entire English coast, giving it the power to mark dangerous reefs or headlands with buoys, paid for by taxes levied on cargoes. By the early 17th century, the corporation controlled the licensing of Thames pilots, and had been granted revenues from the ancient rights of ballastage, beaconage and buoyage on the river. A pleasing strand of derring-do runs alongside the practicalities of maintaining sea marks. In 1588, Trinity House supplied 30 ships for the fleet opposing the Spanish Armada, and in 1636 some of its brethren were fighting pirates in the English Channel. At its foundation, Trinity House was based in Deptford, a few miles downstream from the city. In 1618, it moved upriver to Stepney, where a close of almshouses for decayed mariners survived until the Blitz, and in 1660 to Water Lane, off Lower Thames Street. Several fires later, the corporation sought a new site for its headquarters, and the building in front of us, completed in 1796, is the result. This long, low, classical building gives Trinity Square its name and forms the northern side of the square, looking rather as if a wing of Somerset House or Old Billingsgate Market had struck out on its own. The modern entrance is round to the eastern side, with a wrought-iron bracket over the door, and beside it a colourful coat of arms, 4 galleons quartered by a red cross of St George on a silver shield. The historic main door faces the square, across a forecourt enclosed by gilded railings and tall Venetian lamps. It's flanked by 2 small and faintly camped cannons, poised to deliver a miniature broadside to a passing French privateer. This elegant yet serious facade, as the Pevsner Guide to the City puts it, is the work of the English architect Thomas Wyatt, restored by Albert Richardson with fluent sensitivity after serious damage in the Blitz. Wyatt's butch, rusticated ground floor gives way to a graceful piano nobile, with a fancy country house balustrade and huge plate-glass sash windows interposed with Ionic columns. The columns lead the eye up to a delightfully animated set of reliefs moulded in Coud stone, that remarkably durable ceramic stoneware developed by the pioneering businesswoman and sculptor Eleanor Coud and made in her artificial stone manufactory in Lambeth. The corporation's coat of arms, supported by two hunky mermen, one holding a caduceus and the other a torch, occupies the central niche. Next comes royalty. George III, pop-eyed and pudgy as ever, and his Queen Caroline gaze affectionately at one another from a pair of classical medallions, wreathed in laurel leaves. The outer niches hold the greatest treats. A pair of friezes in which chubby little putty fool around with an anchor, a compass, an arquebus and a heap of assorted chandlery. They're flanked by a quartet of dignified and ornate Baroque lighthouses, the sort of thing you could imagine Poussin dashing off as a grace note to fill the corner of a stormy landscape. The windows beneath them offer glimpses of opulence. Red velvet curtains, prismatically iridescent chandeliers, rich stained glass. Trinity House looks like a club you'd want to be a member of. Wyatt appears to have got the commission after constructing a lighthouse on the lunar shingle of Dungeness for Thomas Cook, 1st Earl of Leicester, in 1791. Trinity House had erected its first lighthouse at Lowestoft in 1609, and in 1732 it moored a lightship on the Nore, a troublesome sandbank in the mouth of the Thames estuary. An Act of Parliament in 1836 gave the corporation responsibility for all English and Welsh lighthouses, backed by an enormous treasury loan of £1.25 million. Britain's rise as a mercantile and imperial power, its conquest of colonies around the globe, and its involvement in the slave trade were all intimately dependent upon its navy and merchant fleet, and these in turn relied on safe and effective navigation. Constructing and maintaining lighthouses in Britain's coastal waters, some of the most dangerous in the world, demanded extraordinary feats of ingenuity and perseverance from the nation's architects and engineers. In the 19th century, Trinity House directed a programme of research into better optics and more durable construction from their maintenance depot at Trinity Buoy Wharf, where Bow Creek flows into the Thames. This is a spot we'll be visiting in a future episode. To this day, Trinity House is the general lighthouse authority for England, Wales and the Channel Islands. It's governed by a master and a court of 31 elder brethren, drawn from a pool of 300 younger brethren, chosen for their experience on ships and at sea. If you're burning with curiosity to see the dress uniform of an elder brother of Trinity House, look up a photograph of Winston Churchill at the 1941 Atlantic Conference. After his appointment to the Brethren in 1913, a courtesy following his promotion to First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill seems to have taken every opportunity to don his double-breasted jacket and peaked cap. On a visit to Trinity House a few months before the Atlantic Conference, however, he was fined £1 for smoking a cigar, in violation of a by-law dating from 1660. If Trinity House is a dapper Georgian sea captain, the old Port of London Authority building beside it is a great bewhiskered Edwardian grandee, staggering out of his club dining room and settling down for a doze in a high-backed leather armchair. You wouldn't bet on him getting up any time soon. If we had to choose one building in London that embodies the vaulting confidence of the British Empire at its meridian, we might pick George Gilbert Scott's suave, opulent Foreign Office of 1868 on Whitehall. But the PLA building, designed by Sir Edwin Cooper and completed in 1922, cuts a close second. It occupies a plot at the northwestern corner of Trinity Square, between two evocatively named side roads, Savage Gardens and Muscovy Street. Two swept-back wings either side of an enormous porticoed tower create the impression, perhaps intentionally, of an ocean-going liner nosing into the square. The institution that occupied this chunk of imperial self-assurance, built incidentally on the site of Samuel Pepys's Navy Board, was created by an Act of Parliament in 1908. By the end of the 19th century, London's riverside was a chaos of privately owned docks and quays, each charging their own rates for loading and unloading. These dock companies also faced growing pressure from new dockers' unions. In 1889, 100,000 workers struck for the dockers' tanner, a minimum wage of 6p an hour. Their victory, for members of a trade with notoriously low pay, poor conditions and very little job security, became a milestone in the emergence of the British labour movement. 2 decades later, the new Port of London Authority was given control of all enclosed docks on the tidal Thames, 70 miles from Teddington Lock out to the Nore. It also took responsibility for dredging the river, providing well-trained pilots, improving the docks to keep pace with London's position as the port of empire, and negotiating dockers' pay and conditions with the unions. To a modern pedestrian, pausing outside the old PLA building, the overwhelming impression is one of sheer scale. Stone steps flanked by voluptuous tridentine cast-iron lamps lead up to a gigantic portico. Fluted columns rise to Corinthian capitals, which frame a pair of trophies in the original sense of that word. Stacks of chains, ropes and tridents supporting shields that depict a galleon in full blousy sail and a pert little seahorse. The supporting wings are plainer, but not by much, and each has a story-high figure set into domed niches to startle the passer-by. On the east wing, a Juno-esque woman represents navigation, her classical helmet pushed back, her hand on a ship's wheel, her sandalled foot propped on a globe girdled with the signs of the zodiac. On the west wing, a turbulently bearded man embodies commerce. He leans against a set of scales, his foot resting on a stack of ledgers, and in his lap a wicker basket of imported goodies. Above them both, rising from the main portico, is Cooper's extraordinarily rumbustious tower, somewhere between a triumphal arch and a mausoleum, bursting with what Victorian architects called go. This is one of those neo-Baroque compositions that seem almost fractal, smaller forms sprouting from larger analogues until the eye is exhausted by detail. Facing out over the square is a colossal statue of Father Thames, balding, bearded, naked, ripped, balanced on an anchor, a trident under his muscular arm. At the foot of the plinth on which he poses, 2 tubby little galleys fan their oars out like the wings of a swan. He points with sublime confidence towards the east, down the estuary and out to sea. He tells us, the entire building tries to persuade us, that the Thames has succeeded the Tiber as the great artery of imperial power, and that Roman triremes were merely avatars of coal-fired British dreadnoughts. A century on, Father Thames's expansive gesture seems touchingly pathetic, even comic. The shrinking influence of the PLA has mirrored the decline of London as a global port. As container shipping became the international standard after the Second World War, the authority focused its attention on the docks downriver at Tilbury, now London's principal container port, and about as far up the shallow Thames estuary as these maritime skyscrapers can go. The PLA moved out of its original home here in 1971 to new offices on the Thames at Gravesend, opposite the vast Tilbury complex. Its main responsibility is traffic control and navigational safety on the river, with a growing role in protecting wildlife and encouraging Londoners to get back out on the water. Cooper's old PLA building is now a hotel, of course it is, but at least one can go in for a drink and marvel at the barefaced bravado of his domed central hall. Resisting the urge to pause for a martini, we press on around the square. The little block on the corner of Bywood Street comes as something of a relief. Unlike the PLA, this is not a building that has designs on you. It's the sort of thing you'd walk past without a second glance in the 11th arrondissement of Paris. Pause, though, for the chiselled Art Nouveau beauties whose heads serve as keystones over the doorways, and for an engraved stone which tells you that this was built for the Swedish Chamber of Commerce and opened in 1920 by one Count Hermann Wrangel. Just across the road is All Hallows by the Tower, strictly beyond our remit today, but this church has shaped the history and the character of Trinity Square, and it's a lovable presence in the streetscape and the skyline. All Hallows really deserves an episode all to itself. It's now rather marooned amidst the glass and steel and concrete of the new Tower Plaza and the endless traffic on Bywood Street, but this ancient church, which incorporates fragments of Anglo-Saxon masonry and a Roman floor in the crypt, is one of London's great survivors. It endured the Great Fire. Pepys watched the progress of the Inferno from the balcony of the tower, but was very nearly destroyed in the Blitz, the interior burned out entirely. After the war it was rebuilt, with concrete arcades and vaults and plenty of clear glass. An unpromising combination, to be sure, but done with immense respect for the surviving stonework, and carried through, as Ian Nairn put it, with childlike audacity and a real sense of fun. Do come and spend an hour here if you possibly can. There's so much to enjoy. The gentle light, the quiet, spacious nave, the polychrome monuments, the dusty model ship suspended above the pews, Grinling Gibbon's exquisitely overblown font cover, an utterly charming museum in the crypt, and a cafe which is usually good for a quiet bacon sandwich, even when the plaza outside is heaving with tourists. For much of the 20th century, All Hallows was best known for its vicar, Philip Thomas Bayard Clayton, known as Tubby Clayton. Like his church, Clayton's story needs more time than I can give it here. As an army chaplain on the Western Front in 1915, he helped to found a rest house for soldiers in Popperinge in Belgium, Talbot House, known in military signal terminology as TOC H. Clayton and his colleagues led prayers and services for soldiers, but they also offered recreation, games, books, endless cups of tea, all in a setting in which military rank and responsibility could, temporarily at least, be put aside. After the war, Clayton founded branches of TOC H in British cities, worked for the welfare of ex-servicemen, and travelled the empire to promote an international movement based on the values of friendship, service, fair-mindedness and faith. As Vicar of All Hallows, he worked with Charles, 1st Viscount Wakefield, who had made a fortune from the Castrol Oil Company, to establish the Tower Hill Improvement Trust. In the decade before the Second World War, the Trust created an artificial beach on the north bank of the Thames, below the Tower, for Clayton's East End parishioners, and it went on to campaign for new public gardens and open spaces around the Tower and the church. Indeed, it funded a refurbishment of Trinity Square gardens in the early 2000s. Clayton and Wakefield are commemorated on the little street that runs north from Trinity Square by Tower Hill Station. Wakefield gets a portrait relief on a house he bought and donated to the parish. By all accounts, he was a charming, sociable man, but here he looks positively bulldoggish, the kind of hard-nosed businessman who would forbid his daughter from marrying Bertie Wooster. Clayton, meanwhile, has received a blue plaque next door, on what was once the Vicarage of All Hallows. Its cellar is now occupied by a wine library, an innovation one suspects Tubby would have enjoyed. This mood of chummy bonhomie fades as we turn from All Hallows and enter the Trinity Square gardens. Insofar as the square has a public function, it's as a place of remembrance. We'll visit the Merchant Marine Memorial in a moment, but in front of it is a monument to those executed on Tower Hill. On an early spring day, the bare, contorted limbs of the trees seem to capture some of the human agony inflicted here. But the memorial itself is understated. A little paved square, marked off with chains on low stone posts and sheltered on two sides by banks of shrubs. More than 125 people were sent to the Tower Hill scaffold, and a row of bronze plaques records the names of the most illustrious to die here. Almost all are aristocrats or bishops, and all are men. Noble women were accorded the courtesy, if that's the word, of a less public death within the walls of the tower. Unlike the kitschy and rather unserious memorial to their executions on Tower Green with its tasselled glass pillow, this offers no false comfort to the dead or the living. In its directness, it echoes the opening stanza of Geoffrey Hill's Funeral Music, a poem which might be said to begin on this spot. The voice, fragrant with mannered humility, with an equable contempt for this world, in honorem Trinitatis. Crash! The head struck down into a meaty conduit of blood. Part of what makes this reticent and rather taciturn memorial so moving is that it makes no attempt to justify or reclaim the lives that ended here. It records the fact of their suffering, no more. We could stand here for hours recalling depictions of executions on Tower Hill in novels and plays and films, not least the brave but bloody end of Thomas Cromwell in Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. Most of all, though, this place makes me think of 4 lines from another great poem which alights here, Little Gidding, the last of T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets. These men, and those who opposed them, and those whom they opposed, accept the constitution of silence and are folded in a single party. The largest presence in these gardens, the Merchant Marine Memorial, holds collective loss and individual bereavement in magnificent moving equipoise. It records the names of merchant navy sailors who died in the 2 world wars and have no known grave. Sir Edwin Lutyens' open-sided hall is dedicated to the 12,000 lost in the First World War, and a sunken garden designed by Sir Edward Mouth has almost 24,000 names from the Second World War. From an architectural point of view, Lutyens' Hall, unveiled by Queen Mary in December 1928, employs the same device as his Great Arch to the Missing of the Somme at Thiepval. The design multiplies wall space at eye level to make room for the names of the missing, grouped alphabetically by the ships on which they served. This ordering is practical, but it also helps to make the immense losses particular. Like the memorials to the PALS battalions of the same conflict, it conveys the sense of a community, a group of mates or colleagues or comrades lost together and now remembered together. The single most numerous loss, 29 columns of crew, not including the passengers who are commemorated elsewhere, is that of the Lusitania, torpedoed off Southern Ireland in May 1915. The lists of ship names, meanwhile, generate a strange and beautiful musique concrète. The Orfordness of Swansea, the Origin of Liverpool, the Oriole of London. Others evoke a lost age of soot and salt and canvas, the Ethelwulf of North Shields, the Eros of Hull, the Calphurnia of Grimsby, the LSD, presumably pounds, shillings and pence, of Ramsgate. Lutyens' Hall itself is a crouching, open-sided structure with plain Doric columns supporting a weighty roof that seems to be yearning quietly for a dome. It occupies the southern margin of the square, with the traffic of Bywood Street grinding away just beyond it. A perpetually noisy space then, but with something of the restless rise and fall of the sea. A row of iron chevaux de frise along the balcony serves, symbolically at least, to hold back the life-going-on bustle of London. This is above all a dignified building, in decoration and proportion. Lutyens succeeds, just as he did at Thiepval, in evoking absence by enclosing an unornamented and powerful emptiness. The steps down to Mouth's World War II memorial, dedicated in 1955, are guarded by 2 stone figures, an officer with his reefer jacket neatly pressed and buttoned, and a seaman, his rumpled duffel coat tied with a length of rope. Both have that chiselled, jut-jawed, slightly distant expression so common on war memorials, the face perhaps of patient duty as distinct from cinematic heroism. They stand in front of pylons which owe something in their proportions to Lutyens' cenotaph on Whitehall. Carved waves at the foot of each pylon make explicit the metaphor concealed in the idea of a sunken garden. We are under the sea here, a silent space apart. The memorial itself, though, has unfortunate overtones of a municipal seaside garden, and one could easily imagine a bandstand and, not inappropriately, deck chairs in place of the stone and bronze compass rose that occupies its centre. Here the list of sailors and ships emphasise the global nature of the conflict. The Merope of Greece, the Mexico of Norway, the Miraflores of Kingston, Jamaica, the Managas of Venezuela. A long run of ships bear the prefix Empire, from the Empire Adventure via the Empire Dabchick and the Empire Houseman to the Empire Zeal. Each bay of Plucks is flanked by stone reliefs of fantastical maritime scenes representing the 7 seas. The sculptor Charles Wheeler was, I think, drawing inspiration from The Tempest, full fathom 5 thy father lies. But the effect is curiously playful. These are not solemn Shakespearean spirits attending the drowned. They're more like the lovely mermaids that flow through Bob Dylan's Desolation Row. A few yards to the east is the most recent addition to the memorial, a bronze anchor and chain on a low stone dome commemorating the 17 merchant mariners killed in the Falklands War. The Merchant Marine Memorial is far from forgotten. Services are held here every year to mark Merchant Navy Day on the 3rd of September. On my visit, I saw wreaths laid at the Falklands Memorial and small crosses or poppies pinned up next to names in the sunken garden, along with a steady stream of, it must be said, rather bemused tourists. And I'd be prepared to bet that while more people make a deliberate trip to Lutyens' Arch at Thiepval, many more people see this memorial, if only at a glance from a passing bus. But it's fair to say that Trinity Square has not become a focus of national remembrance in the way that the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Westminster Abbey or the Cenotaph on Whitehall have. If W.R. Yeats, the last name on the list of the Lusitania's dead, was to return from the depths, many aspects of modern life might confound him. But perhaps most of all, the way in which ships and the sea are no longer at the heart of British life and national identity. In this sense, Trinity Square, the memorials, but also the Port of London Authority building, Trinity House, and even the View, is itself a monument to what London was, the international, imperial, maritime roots of its power and wealth and reach. What the city is now, as Britain reckons with the legacies of empire and the unstable geopolitics of the 21st century, is a question we will return to. I'll be posting pictures from my visit to Trinity Square on the Sun Street Passage Instagram. If you'd like to visit, the best way to get there is Tower Hill Station on the District and Circle lines. Thanks to Jessica Glick for improving my Latin, and to Emma Hughes for general encouragement. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not make a donation to your favourite London charity? Mine, for what it's worth, is Coram, who've been supporting children in London and across the UK for almost 3 centuries. There's a link to the Coram website in the show notes, and they appreciate all donations, large or small. Next time, skiffle, rioja and umbrellas. See you there. Sun Street Passage is written and produced by me, Richard Barnett. Mean Free Path made the music and the art from Wenceslas Holler's 1647 Long View of London. Thanks for listening.